Looks good. Look at you. Hey, Lumi. Congratulations on nabbing first. I'm gonna wait for this 3-minute ad thing to finish running through. It's about 2.5 minutes left. But I am doing pretty well, all things considered. Well, I decided to just bite the bullet and get them out of the way. So the ads start up like 2 minutes after I start stream, but then they go like every hour after that. So every hour there's just a 3-minute break. So, which that's fine because I can throw a be right back up, stand by, get up, stretch. I kind of figure that's a good. I did it that way because, alright, that way those are like my break points. That's when I'm going to go ahead and get up, stretch, everything else. So I figured, you know what, it's not bad. I mean, it's a pause, but like I said, either people see a be right back screen for about 3 minutes, or they just kind of sit through 3 ads, get up, like, you know, go stretch, do whatever they want as well. So I think it works either way. And the fact that I can kind of limit it to like only like every hour, I don't know, I think it seems pretty reasonable. So on like a 3-hour or 4-hour stream, there's like only like what, three breaks or so. It's not bad, I don't think. I guess we'll just kind of have to see. How are you? I haven't seen you in a little bit, hadn't had much of a chance to talk, so... Of course, I am happy to see you. What can I say? I'm glad you're doing okay. Working a little this evening. Theoretically, I should have worked today, but I don't know. My sleep schedule got a little bit borked. So, you got a busy weekend that's coming up? All right. Well, that's cool. So you're just trying to get a bunch of stuff done before the weekend. That makes sense. Oh, that reminds me. I should probably check the pictures that I took from Exotica and probably like throw them up somewhere for, you know, people to kind of look and see. At least the ones, if you know, that kind of thing. 180. Welcome back, I should say. And congratulations on nabbing second. Oh, hey, world building. That's, yes, something else that I need to work on for a couple of other projects I've got. I haven't spent any kind of time thinking about it recently. No, let me rephrase that. I've thought on it and dabbled on it here and there, but I need to sit down and really give it more actual, probably more thought and just kind of start and just get back to putting notes down, in terms of the stuff that I'm looking at, the things I want to do. Ooh, a fountain pen. Very nice, very nice. Actually, I love fountain pens. Yeah. You know what? I know the feeling, 180. Oh my god, that first time that I played Slime Rancher, and I just got so damn absorbed in it. I'm like watching my screen, and meanwhile chat is going off on the side, and I completely missed like everybody's messages for like, you know, a good hour, and all of a sudden I glanced over and I'm like, oh shit. So yeah, I totally get it. You know, yeah, Lumi's all like, wow, he's all, actually I think it was Lumi and Bez, they're like, he's so absorbed in the game right now, he doesn't notice. It was all notice me senpai going on in the comments and shit. So yeah, I make a point to try to, well, number one, not play games in full screen mode anymore, and then number two, you know, keep looking off to the side, making sure that I'm not missing anything. Oh, and also, real quick, Lumi, Ada Ada. How was that? You're very welcome. Pretty good? Just pretty good. I guess I need to work on it. There's still a little bit of instability kind of going on, so we'll just kind of have to play it by ear, how that goes. In fact, I want to actually, if you guys have lines you want me to read or anything like that. Oh, do you think the mic might have let me down? So you think it? Did I get caught up in like the noise reduction again? I actually had to switch the noise reduction from the really good. I think I don't remember which, but it was basically the really good noise reduction in OBS, and I had to fall back to like the crappier noise reduction because every time I would actually do stuff, it would it would literally cut me off. You know, in fact, even now with the current noise reduction, probably if I just sit here like, and if I go something like like at one point the noise reduction would actually kick in and just kill me. Yeah, it does sound like it's a little bit tired, which I don't understand because I live alone. I don't talk to anybody. You know, if anything, I might like, you know, type to people. So it's not like I'm using the voice, but maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe I need to actually like start talking to myself out loud more, you know. The voices, get them out of my head and out and make it tangible so people can, well, so my neighbors make me, we'll sit there wondering, does he have company? Who's he talking to? What's going on? Vocal exercises. I need to work on more of those too. Yes, put that mouth to work. I know, well, I understand what you meant, but then again, I also understood what you meant. To redeem an aura at the end of stream. Which, okay, will do. Which also, by the way, do you guys have, since we're, you know, again, Thursdays, yeah, we usually do like the kind of the chilling and then the reading lines and stuff like that. Are there any things that you guys want me to go ahead and read or dictate or say or anything like that? Oh, hey, who's this latest follower? Kana Parsley. Kana Parlay. Okay. I just noticed I'm suddenly back up to 70 followers again. I'm like, alright, cool. No idea who that is, but awesome. Always happy for it. Yeah, I went from 71 to all of a sudden I dropped down to 69, which, okay, good number, not complaining. Still kind of liked it better when I was back up over 70, but hey. But, you know, I was able to go ahead and hang out in 69 for a little while. And read some of Atra stuff. You know what? It's been a minute since I've read any of his stuff. You know, why don't... Let me see here. I feel like I should switch back into After Dark mode. Let me dim the lights. So, let's see here. Yeah, no, I get you. You suddenly say, hey, look, milestone, no, what the crap. Yeah. There was actually, I had another friend of mine who met another streamer that I was like watching and stuff, basically kind of said the same thing. They had just hit 300 and then somebody unfollowed and like kicked them right back down to 299. I'm like, why? She's like, what did you do? And so yeah, she was salty. It's like, I understood the salt. You know. And I don't mind people are going to come and go and whatever else. Yeah, obviously, the more the merrier. I hope more people kind of like what I do. So at some point, first I got to go ahead and get back and be steady again. And get back on schedule. Hit a little bit of hiccup, but I'm glad I was able to go ahead and iron out the King Silvery in OBS. So here I am. Yeah, 1K and then all of a sudden, dang, $9.99. That's just like, damn it. I'm so close, so close. So close. So anyhow, let's see what we got. And yeah, oh, shoot, you know what? I didn't click on the tweet, or I didn't click to send the tweet. Oopsie. Let me go ahead and dip that out real quick. 13 minutes late, but hey, at least it's running. Oh look, May got some Darjeeling tea. That's awesome. So it was kind of cool because just there was one day I was on May's stream and she asked about tea recommendations, and I just happened to ask her a few quick questions, and you know, just for whatever reason, I just kind of went with the flow and everything, but asking her, and I just kind of, after asking her a few questions, narrowing a few things down, it just struck me that she might really like Darjeeling tea, so I recommended it to her. She'd never had it and stuff, so, and yeah, it turns out that she loves it. It's one of her faves now, so awesome. I'm glad that worked out because, you know, I was kind of worried. So, you know what? I don't see why we couldn't do story time. Especially right now while my voice seems to be holding up, you know. You gotta take advantage of these moments when they're here, you know? Strike while the iron's hot. Oops, sorry, I totally forgot to mute while I was drinking that water. And that's another thing I gotta make sure that I'm doing. It occurred to me that I am not nearly drinking enough water during the day. I've got like this big ginormous tumbler that probably holds like roughly like 32 ounces if I fill it practically up to the brim, and I'm trying to make a point of drinking like at least 3 of those a day. But I've kind of noticed that, like, particularly today, like just now and everything, I kind of look down and like, you know, this thing's been sitting on my desk all day and I've been sipping at it occasionally, but I just usually forget about it. And it's only half full and it's from the first fill this morning. So I'm completely slacking off in terms of how much I'm drinking. I'm like way behind on that. So I need to make a point to hydrate a hell of a lot more than I have been. But anyway, okay, I do have to ask Nalumi. One of your character's favorites. Which one? I would actually think that it's the vampires, and I don't know why I'm suddenly drawing a blank on his name. But is it his favorite tea? Because it just seems to me like he'd be a Darjeeling fan. And what is the fall of the House of Usher? Devereaux. Yeah, okay. It was either going to be him or Devereaux. Yes. I can totally see Devereaux enjoying Darjeeling. Especially after that poetry. But yeah, Dev actually was... well, no, I was actually thinking of the vampire, but yeah, Dev was the other one whose name that I also couldn't think of. The other one that I was trying to remember. I knew it was one. I knew it had to be one or two. It had to be one of the two whose poetry you had me read that one time. So, and yes, I mentioned your poetry on Maine. Yeah, but anyway. No, Lumi, if you guys don't know, is a writer. You know, she writes a lot, and every now and then she wants me to go ahead and, you know, she has me like read some of her stuff, and she had a couple of poems that two of her characters had written. She wanted me to read them, and you know what? I was completely taken with one of them. The character that you just mentioned, Devereaux, the fancy half elf. He wrote this one poem that just was actually really deep, and I actually really enjoyed the poem. At least deep in terms of if you actually look at the translation notes, because it was, you know, quote unquote translated from Elvish. So just the notes in terms of the depth of the words and phrases, you know, the colloquial language that he actually used, it was really interesting. So I really enjoyed it. Dev trying to get deep. Well, you know, as far as I'm concerned, I'm pretty sure Dev only kind of got to the tip, but, you know, what can I say? Alright, let's see here. The Fall of the House of Usher. Let me take a look at this. The Poe. Wait. Well, damn. Alright. Okay, you know what? Let me switch up the tags a little bit. I'm gonna go ahead and switch this over to reading ASMR. How about that? Does that sound good for you guys? you want to jump into the voice chat and read it to me? Really? No, I'm good with it. I'm perfectly good with it. I don't mind at all. Let me just add... I'm gonna add a reading ASMR tag here. Alright, so we are now officially a reading stream. But yeah, nope, I'm absolutely down to go ahead and read this. You guys all cool with that then? Sound good? So let's see here. Let me just switch back to that window here real quick and see about giving this a go. The Fall of the House of Usher. I am not sure that I'm familiar with this one. So real quick question, Lemmy. So is the whole, I assume the whole thing, this is actually a story with an embedded poem. Is that right? Accurate, then, I assume? And it's not just the poem in the middle of this, which the verses are apparently named The Haunted Palace. So I assume this means you want to hear the whole thing, correct? During the whole of a dull, dark, and soundless day in the autumn of the year, when the clouds hung oppressively low in the heavens, I had been passing alone, on horseback, through a singularly dreary tract of country, and at length found myself, as the shades of the evening drew on, within view of the melancholy House of Usher. I know not how it was, but with the first glimpse of that building, a sense of insufferable gloom pervaded my spirit. I say insufferable, for the feeling was unrelieved by any of that half-pleasurable, because poetic sentiment with which the mind usually receives even the sternest natural images of the desolate of terror or terrible. I looked upon the scene before me, upon the mere house, and the simple landscape features of the domain, upon the bleak walls, upon the vacant eye-like windows, upon a few rank sedges, and upon a few white trunks of decayed trees, with an utter depression of soul which I can compare to no earthly sensation more properly than to the after-dream of the reveler upon opium, the bitter lapse into everyday life, the hideous dropping off of the veil. There was an iciness, a sinking, a sickening of the heart, an unredeemed dreariness of thought which no goading of the imagination could torture into aught the sublime. What was it? I paused to think. What was it that so unnerved me in the contemplation of the House of Usher? It was a mystery all insoluble, nor could I grapple with the shadowy fancies that crowded upon me as I pondered. I was forced to fall back upon the unsatisfactory conclusion that, while beyond doubt, there are combinations of very simple natural objects which have the power of thus affecting us, still the analysis of this power lies among considerations beyond our depth. It was possible, I reflected, that a mere different arrangement of the particulars of the scene, of the details of the picture, would be sufficient to modify, or perhaps to annihilate its capacity for sorrowful impression. And, acting upon this idea, I reined my horse to the precipitous brink of a black and lurid tarn that lay in unruffled luster by the dwelling, and gazed down, but with a shudder even more thrilling than before, upon the remodeled and inverted images of the gray sedge, and the ghastly tree stems, and the vacant and eye-like windows. Nevertheless, in this mansion of gloom I now proposed to myself a sojourn of some weeks. Its proprietor, Roderick Usher, had been one of my boon companions in boyhood, but many years had elapsed since our last meeting. A letter, however, had lately reached me in a distant part of the country, a letter from him, which, in its wildly importunate nature, had admitted of no other than a personal reply. The MS. Sorry. The MS gave evidence of nervous agitation. The writer spoke of acute body illness, of a mental disorder which oppressed him, and of an earnest desire to see me as his best, and indeed his only personal friend, with the view of attempting, by the cheerfulness of my society, some alleviation of his malady. It was the manner in which all this, and much more, was said. It was the apparent heart that went with his request, which allowed me no room for hesitation, and I accordingly obeyed forthwith what I still considered a very singular summons. Although as boys we had been even intimate associates, yet I really knew little of my friend. His reserve had always been excessive and habitual. I was aware, however, that his very ancient family had been noted, time out of mind, for a peculiar sensibility of temperament, displaying itself through long ages in many works of exalted art, manifested of late in repeated deeds of munificent yet unobtrusive charity. as well as in a passionate devotion to the intricacies, perhaps even more than the orthodox and easily recognizable beauties of musical science. I had learned, too, the very remarkable fact that the stem of the Usher race, all-time honored as it was, had put forth, at no period, any enduring branch. In other words, that the entire family lay in the direct line of descent, and had always, with very trifling and very temporary variation, so lain. It was this deficiency, I considered, which, while running over in thought the perfect keeping of the character of the premises with the accredited character of the people, and while speculating upon the possible influence which the one, in the long lapse of centuries, might have exercised upon the other, it was this deficiency, perhaps, of collateral issue, and the consequent undeviating transmission, from sire to son, of the patrimony with the name which had at length so identified the two as to merge the original title of the estate in the quaint and equivocal appellation of the House of Usher, an appellation which seemed to include, in the minds of the peasantry who used it, both the family and the family mansion. I have said that the sole effect of my somewhat childish experiment, that of looking down within the tarn, had been to deepen the first singular impression. There can be no doubt that the consciousness of the rapid increase of my superstition, for why should I not so term it, served mainly to accelerate the increase itself. Such, I have long known, is the paradoxical law of all sentiments having terror as a basis. And it might have been for this reason only that, when I again uplifted my eyes to the house itself, from its image in the pool, there grew in my mind a strange fancy, a fancy so ridiculous, indeed, that, I but to mention it, to show the vivid force of the sensations which oppressed me, I had so worked upon my imagination as really to believe that about the whole mansion and domain there hung an atmosphere peculiar to themselves and their immediate vicinity, an atmosphere which had no affinity with the air of heaven, but which had reeked up from the decayed trees, and the grey wall, and the silent tarn, a pestilent and mystic vapor, dull, sluggish, faintly discernible, and leaden-hued. Shaking off from my spirit what must have been a dream, I scanned more narrowly the real aspect of the building. Its principal features seemed to be that of an excessive antiquity. The discoloration of ages had been great. Minute fungi overspread the whole exterior, hanging in a fine tangled webwork from the eaves. Yet all this was apart from any extraordinarily dilapidation. No portion of the masonry had fallen, and there appeared to be a wild inconsistency between its still perfect adaptation of parts and the crumbling condition of the individual stones. In this, there was much that reminded me of the specious totality of old woodwork, which has rotted for long years in some neglected vault, with no disturbance from the breath of the external air. Beyond this indication of extensive decay, however, the fabric gave little token of instability. Perhaps the eye of a scrutinizing observer might have discovered a barely perceptible fissure, which, extending from the roof of the building in front, made its way down the wall in a zigzag direction, until it became lost in the sullen waters of the tarn. Noticing these things, I rode over a short causeway to the house. A servant in waiting took my horse, and I entered the Gothic archway of the hall. A valet of stealthy step thence conducted me in silence through many dark and intricate passages in my progress to the studio of his master. Much that I encountered on the way contributed, I know not how, to heighten the vague sentiments of which I have already spoken. while the objects around me, while the carvings of the ceilings, the somber tapestries of the walls, the ebon blackness of the floors, and the phantasmagoric armorial trophies which rattled as I strode, were but matters to which, or to such as which, I had been accustomed from my infancy. While I hesitated not to acknowledge how familiar was all this, I still wondered to find how unfamiliar were the fancies which ordinary images were stirring up. On one of the staircases, I met the physician of the family. Sorry. His countenance, I thought, wore a mingled expression of low cunning and perplexity. He accosted me with trepidation and passed me. The valet now threw open a door and ushered me into the presence of his master. The room in which I found myself was very large and lofty. The windows were long, narrow, and pointed, and at so vast a distance from the black oaken floor as to be altogether inaccessible from within. Feeble gleams of encrimsoned light made their way through the trellised panes, and served to render sufficiently distinct the more prominent objects around. The eye, however, struggled in vain to reach the remoter angles of the chamber, or the recesses of the vaulted and fretted ceiling. Dark draperies hung upon the walls. The general furniture was profuse, comfortless, antique, and tattered. Many books and musical instruments lay scattered about, but failed to give any vitality to the scene. I felt that I breathed in an atmosphere of sorrow. An air of stern, deep, and irredeemable gloom hung over and pervaded all. Upon my entrance, Usher rose from a sofa on which he had been lying at full length, and greeted me with a vivacious warmth which had much in it I had first thought of an overdone cordiality, of the constrained effort of the ennuyé man of the world. Of the ennuyé man of the world. A glance, however, at his countenance convinced me of his perfect sincerity. Ah, thank you. Ennui. Not familiar with that one. We sat down, and for some moments, while he spoke not, I gazed upon him with a feeling half of pity, half of awe. Surely, man had never before so terribly altered, in so brief a period, as had Roderick Usher. It was with difficulty that I could bring myself to admit the identity of the one being before me with the companion of my early boyhood. Yet the character of his face had been at all times remarkable. A cadaverous of complexion, an eye large, liquid, and luminous beyond comparison. Lips somewhat thin and very pallid, but of a surpassingly beautiful curve. A nose of a delicate Hebrew model, but with the breadth of nostril unusual in similar formations. A finely molded chin, speaking, in its want of prominence, of a want of moral energy. Hair of more than web-like softness and tenuity. These features, with an inordinate expansion above the regions of the temple, made up altogether a countenance of not easily to be forgotten. And now in the mere exaggeration of the prevailing character of these features, and of the expression that they were wont to convey, lay so much of change that I doubted to whom I spoke. The now ghastly pallor of the skin, and the now miraculous luster of the eye, above all things, startled and even awed me. The silken hair, too, had been suffered to grow all unheeded, and as, in its wild gossamer texture, it floated rather than fell about the face. I could not, even with effort, connect its arabesque expression with any idea of simple humanity. Yes, gossamer is a good word, but God, the rest of this. Also, the somberness. There's this interesting jarring thing of, yeah, I know it's Poe. It's, yes, par for Poe's course, but I'm also trying not to laugh because the somberness of Poe's writing versus the background music, I probably should have changed that. But we're just going to go ahead and run with it and just let it add to the dissonance. No, it's muted, so, and it's not like upbeat, so that works. In the manner of my friend, I was at once struck with an incoherence, an inconsistency, and I soon found this to arise from a series of feeble and futile struggles to overcome a habitual trepidancy, an excessive nervous agitation. For something of this nature, I had indeed been prepared, no less by his letter than by reminiscences of certain boyish traits, and by conclusions deduced from his peculiar physical conformation and temperament. His action was alternately vivacious and sullen. His voice varied rapidly from a tremendous indecision, when the animal spirits seemed utterly in abeyance, to that species of energetic concision, that abrupt, weighty, unhurried, and hollow-sounding enunciation, that leaden, self-balanced, and perfectly modulated guttural utterance, which may be observed in the lost drunkard, or the irreclaimable eater of opium, during the periods of his most intense excitement. It was thus that he spoke of the object of my visit, of his earnest desire to see me, and of the solace he expected me to afford him. He entered at some length into what he conceived to be the nature of his malady. It was, he said, a constitutional and family evil, and one for which he despaired to find a remedy. A mere nervous affection, he immediately added, which would undoubtedly soon pass off. It displayed itself in a host of unnatural sensations. Some of these, as he detailed them, interested and bewildered me, although perhaps the terms and the general manner of the narration had their weight. He suffered much from a morbid acuteness of the senses. The most insipid food was alone endurable. He could wear only garments of certain texture. The odors of all flowers were oppressive. His eyes were tortured by even a faint light. And there were but peculiar sounds, and these from stringed instruments, which did not inspire him with horror. To an anomalous species of terror, I found him a bounden slave. "I shall perish," said he. "I must perish in this deplorable folly. Thus, and not otherwise, shall I be lost. I dread the events of the future, not in themselves, but in their results. I shudder at the thought of any, even the most trivial, incident which may operate upon this intolerable agitation of soul. I have, indeed, no abhorrence of danger, except in its absolute effect, in terror. In this pitiable condition, I feel that the period will sooner or later arrive when I must abandon life and reason altogether, in some struggle with the grim phantasm, fear. I learned, moreover, at intervals, and through broken and equivocal hints, another singular feature of his mental condition. He was enchained by certain superstitious impressions in regard to the dwelling which he tenanted, and whence for many years he had never ventured forth. In regard to an influence whose wow. I'm sorry, let me try that again. In regard to an influence whose supposititious force was conveyed in terms too shadowy here to be restated. An influence which some peculiarities in the mere form and substance of his family mansion had, by dint of long sufferance, he said, obtained over his spirit. An effect which the physique of the grey walls and turrets, and of the dim tarn into which they all looked down, had at length brought about the morale of his existence. He admitted, however, though with hesitation, that much of the peculiar gloom which thus afflicted him could be traced to a more natural and far more palpable origin, to the severe and long-continued illness. Indeed, to the evidently approaching dissolution of a tenderly beloved sister, his sole companion for long years, his last and only relative on earth. Her decease, he said, with a bitterness which I can never forget, would leave him the hopeless and the frail, the last of the ancient race of the Ushers. While he spoke, the Lady Madeline, for so she was called, passed slowly through a remote portion of the apartment, and, without having noticed my presence, disappeared. I regarded her with an utter astonishment not unmingled with dread, and yet I found it impossible to account for such feelings. A sensation of stupor oppressed me as my eyes followed her retreating steps. When a door at length closed upon her, my glance sought instinctively and eagerly the countenance of the brother, but he had buried his face in his hands, and I could only perceive that a far more than ordinary wanness had overspread the emaciated fingers through which trickled many passionate tears. The disease of the Lady Madeline had long baffled the skill of her physicians. A settled apathy, a gradual wasting away of the person, and frequent although transient affections of a partially cataleptical character were the unusual diagnosis. Hitherto, she had steadily borne up against the pressure of her malady, and had not betaken herself finally to bed. But on the closing in of the evening of my arrival at the house, she succumbed, as her brother told me at night with inexpressible agitation, to the prostrating power of the destroyer. And I learned that the glimpse I had obtained of her person would thus probably be the last I should obtain, that the lady, at least while living, would be seen by me no more. For several days ensuing, her name was unmentioned by either Usher or myself, and during this period, I was busied in earnest endeavors to alleviate the melancholy of my friend. We painted and read together, or I listened, as if in a dream, to the wild improvisations of a speaking guitar. And thus, as a closer and still closer intimacy admitted me more unreservedly into the recesses of his spirit, the more bitterly did I perceive the futility of all attempt at cheering a mind from which darkness, as if an inherent positive quality, poured forth upon all objects of the moral and physical universe, in one unceasing radiation of gloom. I shall ever bear about me a memory of the many solemn hours I thus spent alone with the master of the House of Usher. Yet I should fail in any attempt to convey an idea of the exact character of the studies, or of the occupations in which he involved me, or led me the way. An excited and highly distempered ideality threw a sulphurous luster over all. His long improvised dirges will ring forever in my ears. Among other things, I hold painfully in mind a singular perversion and amplification of the wild air of the last waltz of von Weber. From the paintings over which his elaborate fancy brooded, and which grew, touch by touch, into vagueness, and which I shuddered the more thrillingly, because I shuddered knowing not why. From these paintings, vivid as their images now are before me, I would in vain endeavor to adduce more than a small portion which should lie within the compass of merely with written words. By the utter simplicity, by the nakedness of his designs, he arrested and overawed attention. If ever mortal painted an idea, that mortal was Roderick Usher. For me at least, in the circumstances then surrounding me, there arose out of the pure abstractions which the hypochondriac contrived to throw upon his canvas an intensity of intolerable awe, no shadow of which felt I yet ever in the contemplation of the certainly growing yet too concrete reveries of Fuseli. One of the more phantasmagoric conceptions of my friend, partaking not so rigidly of the spirit of abstraction, may be shadowed forth, although feebly, in words. A small picture presented the interior of an immensely long and rectangular vault or tunnel, with low walls, smooth, white, and without interruption or device. Certain accessory points of the design served well to convey the idea that this excavation lay at an exceeding depth below the surface of the earth. No outlet was observed in any portion of its vast extent, and no torch or other artificial source of light was discernible. Yet a flood of intense rays rolled throughout, and bathed the whole in a ghastly and inappropriate splendor. I have just spoken of that morbid condition of the auditory nerve which rendered all music intolerable to the sufferer, with the exception of certain effects of stringed instruments. It was, perhaps, the narrow limits to which he thus confined himself upon the guitar, which gave birth, in great measure, to the fantastic character of his performances. But the fervid facility of his impromptus could not be so accounted for. They must have been, and were, in the notes, as well as in the words of his wild fantasies, for he not unfrequently accompanied himself with rhymed verbal improvisations, the result of that intense mental collectedness and concentration to which I have previously alluded, as observable only in particular moments of the highest artificial excitement. The words of one of these rhapsodies I have easily remembered. I was, perhaps, the more forcibly impressed with it as he gave it, because, in the under or mystic current of its meaning, I fancied that I perceived, and for the first time, a full consciousness on the part of Usher, of the tottering of his lofty reason upon her throne. The verses, which were entitled The Haunted Palace, ran very nearly if not accurately, thus. In the greenest of our valleys, by good angels tenanted, once a fair and stately palace, radiant palace reared its head. In the monarch thought's dominion it stood there. Never seraph spread opinion over fabric held so fair. Banners yellow, glorious golden, on its roof did float and flow. This, all this, was in the olden time long ago. And every gentle air that dallied in that sweet day, along the ramparts plumed and pallid, a winged odor went away. Wanderers in that happy valley, through two luminous windows saw spirits moving musically to a lute's well-tuned law. Round about a throne where sitting Porphyrogene, in a state his glory well befitting, the ruler of the realm was seen. And all with pearl and ruby glowing was the fair palace door, through which came flowing, and sparkling evermore a troop of echoes whose sweet duty was but to sing, in voices of surpassing beauty, the wit and wisdom of their king. But evil things in robes of sorrow assailed the monarch's high estate. Ah, let us mourn, for never morrow shall a dawn upon him desolate. And round about his home the glory that blushed and bloomed is but a dim remembered story of the old time entombed. And travelers now within that valley through the red-litten windows see vast forms that more fantastically to a discordant melody, while like a rapid ghastly river through the pale door a hideous throng rush out forever and laugh but smile no more. Okay. We got about 7 minutes before the next ad break, so let me try to see if I can get through this next paragraph. I well remember that suggestions arising from this ballad led us into a train of thought wherein there became manifest an opinion of Usher's which I mention not so much as on account of its novelty, for other men have thought thus, as on account of the pertinacity which with he maintained it. This opinion in its general form was that of the sentience of all vegetable things, but in his disordered fancy, the idea had assumed a more daring character and trespassed, under certain conditions, upon the kingdom of inorganization. I lack words to express the full extent, or the earnest abandon of his persuasion. The belief, however, was connected, as I have previously hinted, within the grey stones of the home of his forefathers. The conditions of the sentience had been here, he imagined, fulfilled in the method of collocation of these stones, in the order of their arrangement, as well as that of the many fungi which overspread them, and of the decayed trees which stood around, above all in the long undisturbed endurance of this arrangement, and in its reduplication in the still waters of the tarn. Its evidence, the evidence of the sentience, was to be seen, he said, and I here started as he spoke, in the gradual, yet certain condensation of an atmosphere of their own about the waters and the walls. The result was discoverable, he added, in that silent yet importunate and terrible influence which for centuries had molded the destinies of his family, and which made him, when I now saw him, what he was. Such opinions need no comment, and I will make none. Okay, that only took 2 minutes. Our books, the books which for years had formed no small portion of the mental existence of the invalid, were, as might be supposed, in strict keeping with this character of phantasm. We pored together over such works as the Vervent de Chartreuse of Gessendi, the Belphegor of Machiavelli, the Heaven and Hell of Swedenborg, Subterranean Voyage of Nicholas Klim by Holberg, the Chiromancy of Robert Flood, of Jean de Indagine, and of de la Cambre, the Journey into the Blue Distance of Tieck, and the City of the Sun of Campanella. One favorite volume was a small octavo edition of the Directorium Inquisitorium by the Dominican Emeric de Geron, and there were passages in Pomponius Mela about the old African satyrs and agapans, over which Usher would sit dreaming for hours. His chief delight, however, was found in the perusal of an exceedingly rare and curious book in quarto Gothic, the Manual of a Forgotten Church, the Vigile Motorum Secundum Coram Ecclesiae Maguntine. Yeah, I kind of butchered the crap out of that. Anybody who read French, keep in mind, this is a cold read. Let's see if I can get through one more paragraph before the break. I could not help thinking of the wild ritual of this work, and of its probable influence upon the hypochondriac, when one evening, having informed me abruptly that the Lady Madeline was no more, he stated his intention of preserving her corpse for a fortnight, previously to its final interment, in one of the numerous vaults within the main walls of the building. The worldly reason, however, assigned for the singular proceeding was one which I did not feel at liberty to dispute. The brother had been led to his resolution, so he told me, by consideration of the unusual character of the malady of the deceased, of certain obtrusive and eager inquiries on the part of her medical men, and of the remote and exposed situation of the burial ground of the family. I will not deny that when I called to mind the sinister countenance of the person whom I met upon the staircase, on the day of my arrival at the house, I had no desire to oppose what I regarded as at best but a harmless and by no means an unnatural precaution. At the request of Usher, I personally aided him in the arrangements for the temporary entombment. The body having been encoffined, we two alone bore it to its rest. The vault in which we placed it, and which had been so long unopened that our torches, half smothered in its oppressive atmosphere, gave us little opportunity for investigation, was small, damp, and entirely without means of admission for light, lying at great depth immediately beneath that portion of the building in which was my own sleeping apartment. It had been used, apparently, in remote feudal times for the worst purposes of a dojon keep, and in later days as a place of deposit for powder or some other highly combustible substance, as a portion of its floor and the whole interior of a long archway through which we reached it was carefully sheathed in copper. The door, of massive iron, had been also similarly protected. Its immense weight caused an unusually sharp grating sound as it moved upon its hinges. Okay, so we got about 27 seconds left before we break for the hour, I guess. And so this is going to wind up being like a 3-minute ad break, but this will be a good moment to kind of break, stretch, rehydrate, because I got to go ahead and refill my water anyway. And I'm probably going to go ahead and try to get something warm. Like, I'm going to make myself a nice cup of warm tea. Let's see how that does on my throat. So, you know what? For the moment, I'm going to go ahead and kick up the Be Right Back. And when we come back after this ad break, then we will go ahead and continue with our reading of The Fall of the House of Usher. So I'll see you guys in about 3 minutes. I'm back. I assume you guys didn't really necessarily go anywhere. Ow, ow, hot. Shit. Damn. So I've got some Earl Grey kind of steeping over here on the side. We'll let that be. But so I don't know, I think about 3-4 minutes before break. It's not a bad, like, kind of kick every hour. So I hope you enjoyed that brief pause. And again, we are in the middle of reading The Fall of the House of Usher. Welcome back, Lumi. Welcome. We missed you terribly. So let's see here. Where did I leave off? Yep. Okay. What do I think of the story so far? I had almost forgotten what Poe's writing was like. This was a pretty good reminder. I mean, dude was like the original. I'm not gonna call him an edgelord, but he was definitely like the original, like, you know, edgy, gloomy, you know. But I mean, yeah, he's the original goth. Everybody else after him, they're pretenders. They're pretenders that don't nearly enunciate or write as eloquently. Or I don't know if I'd call it eloquent, but certainly descriptive. But yeah, there is a really interesting kind of thing going on here. And I gotta admit, I kind of gotta come back a little bit later and listen to it again, because yes, I am kind of I'm a little bit caught up in reading it, although I am kind of like, what the hell is going on with this? But, you know, there's something kind of trippy going on with his friend. So, shall we continue? This is some next level shit. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Having deposited our mournful burden upon trestles within this region of horror, we partially turned aside the yet unscrewed lid of the coffin and looked upon the face of the tenant. A striking similitude between the brother and sister now first arrested my attention, and Usher, divining perhaps my thoughts, murmured out some fresh words from which I learned that the deceased and himself had been twins, and that sympathies of a scarcely intelligible nature had always existed between them. Our glances, however, rested not long upon the dead, for we could not regard her unawed. The disease which had thus entombed the lady in the maturity of youth had left, as usual in all maladies of a strictly catacleptical character, the mockery of a faint blush upon the bosom and the face, and that suspiciously lingering smile upon the lip, which is so terrible in death. We replaced and screwed down the lid, and, having secured the door of iron, made our way with toil into the scarcely less gloomy apartments of the upper portion of the house. And now, some days of bitter grief having elapsed, an observable change came over the features of the mental disorder of my friend. His ordinary manner had vanished. His ordinary occupations were neglected or forgotten. He roamed from chamber to chamber with hurried, unequal, and objectless step. The pallor of his countenance had assumed, if possible, a more ghastly hue, but the luminousness of his eye had utterly gone out. The once occasional huskiness of his tone was heard no more, and a tremulous quaver, as if of extreme terror, habitually characterized his utterance. There were times, indeed, when I thought his unceasingly agitated mind was laboring with some oppressive secret to divulge, which he struggled for the necessary courage. At times again, I was obligated to resolve all into the mere inexplicable vagaries of madness, for I beheld him gazing upon vacancy for long hours, in an attitude of the profoundest attention, as if listening to some imaginary sound. It was no wonder that his condition terrified, that it infected me. I felt creeping upon me by slow yet certain degrees the wild influences of his own fantastic yet impressive superstitions. It was especially upon retiring to bed late in the night of the 7th or 8th day after the placing of the Lady Madeline within the dungeon, that I experienced the full power of such feelings. Sleep came not near my couch, while the hours waned and waned away. I struggled to reason off the nervousness which had dominion over me. I endeavored to believe that much, if not all of what I felt, was due to the bewildering influence of the gloomy furniture of the room, of the dark and tattered draperies, which, tortured into motion by the breath of a rising tempest, swayed fitfully to and fro upon the walls, and rustled uneasily about the decorations of the bed. But my efforts were fruitless. An irrepressible tremor gradually pervaded my frame, and at length there sat upon my very heart an incubus of utterly causeless alarm. Shaking this off with a gasp and a struggle, I uplifted myself upon the pillows, and, peering earnestly within the intense darkness of the chamber, hearkened. I know not why, except that an instinctive spirit prompted me, to certain low and indefinite sounds which came, through the pause of the storm, at long intervals, I knew not whence. Overpowered by an intense sentiment of horror, unaccountable yet unendurable, I threw on my clothes with haste, for I felt that I should sleep no more during the night, and endeavored to arouse myself from the pitiable condition into which I had fallen, by pacing rapidly to and fro through the apartment. I had taken but few turns in this manner, when a light step on an adjoining staircase arrested my attention. I presently recognized it as that of Usher. In an instant afterward he rapped, with a gentle touch, at my door, and entered bearing a lamp. His countenance was, as usual, cadaverously wan, but, moreover, there was a species of mad hilarity in his eyes, an evidently restrained hysteria in his whole demeanor. His air appalled me, but anything was preferable to the solitude which I had so long endured, and I even welcomed his presence as a relief. "And you have not seen it?" he said abruptly, after having stared about him for some moments in silence. "You have not then seen it? But stay, you shall." Thus speaking, and having carefully shaded his lamp, he hurried to one of the casements, and threw it freely open to the storm. The impetuous fury of the entering gust nearly lifted us from our feet. It was indeed a tempestuous yet sternly beautiful night, and one wildly singular in its terror and its beauty. A whirlwind had apparently collected its force in our vicinity, for there were frequent and violent alternations in the direction of the wind, and the exceeding density of the clouds, which hung so low as to press upon the turrets of the house, did not prevent our perceiving the lifelike velocity with which they flew careening from all points against each other, without passing away into the distance. I say that even their exceeding density did not prevent our perceiving this. Yet we had no glimpse of the moon nor stars, nor were there any flashing forth of the lightning. But the undersurfaces of the huge masses of agitated vapor, as well as all terrestrial objects immediately around us, were glowing in the unnatural light of a faintly luminous and distinctly visible gaseous exhalation which hung about it and shrouded the mansion. You must not behold this," said I, shudderingly, to Usher, as I led him with a gentle violence from the windows to a seat. "These appearances, which bewilder you, are merely electrical phenomena not uncommon, or it may be that they have their ghastly origin in the rank miasma of the tarn. Let us close this casement. The air is chilling and dangerous to your frame. Here is one of your favorite romances. I will read and you shall listen. And so we shall pass away this terrible night together." The antique volume which I had taken up was The Mad Tryst of Sir Lancelot Canning, but I had called it a favorite of Usher's more in a sad jest than in earnest, for, in truth, there is little in its uncouth and unimaginative proximity which could have had interest for the lofty and spiritual ideality of my friend. It was, however, the only book immediately at hand, and I indulged a vague hope that the excitement which now agitated the hypochondriac might find relief, for the history of mental disorder is full of similar anomalies, even in the extremeness of the folly with which I could read. Could I have judged, indeed, by the wild, overstrained air of vivacity with which he hearkened, or apparently hearkened, to the words of the tale, I might well have congratulated myself upon the success of my design. I had arrived at that well-known portion of the story where Ethelred, the hero of the tryst, having sought in vain for peaceable admission into the dwelling of the hermit, proceeds to make good an entrance by force. Here it will be remembered, the words of the narrative run thus. "And Ethelred, who was by nature of a doughy heart, and who was now mighty withal, on account of the powerfulness of the wine which he had drunken, waited no longer to hold parley with the hermit, who in sooth was of an obstinate and maliceful turn, but, feeling the rain upon his shoulders, and fearing the rising of the tempest, uplifted his mace outright, and with blows made quickly room in the plankings of the door for his gauntleted hand, and now pulling therewith sturdily, he so cracked and ripped and tore all asunder, that the noise of the dry and hollow-sounding wood alarummed and reverberated throughout the forest." At the termination of this sentence, I started, and for a moment paused, for it appeared to me, although I had once concluded that my excited fancy had deceived me, it appeared to me that, from some very remote portion of the mansion, there came indistinctly to my ears what might have been, in its exact similarity of character, the echo, but a stifled and dull one certainly, of the very cracking and ripping sound which Sir Launcelot had so particularly described. It was, beyond doubt, the coincidence alone which had arrested my attention. For, amid the rattling of the sashes of the casements and the ordinary commingled noises of the still increasing storm, the sound in itself had nothing surely which should have interested or disturbed me. I continued the story. But the good champion Ethelred, now entering within the door, was sore enraged and amazed to perceive no signal of the maliceful hermit, but, in the stead thereof, a dragon of a scaly and prodigious demeanor, and of a fiery tongue, which sate in guard before a palace of gold, and a floor of silver, and upon the wall there hung a shield of shining brass, with this legend enwritten: Who entereth herein a conqueror hath been, who slayeth the dragon, the shield he shall win. And Ethelred uplifted his mace, and struck upon the head of the dragon, which fell before him, and gave up his pesty breath, with a shriek so horrid and harsh, and withal so piercing, that Ethelred had feigned to close his ears with his hands against the dreadful noise of it, the like of whereof was never before heard. Here again I paused abruptly, and now with a feeling of wild amazement, for there could be no doubt whatsoever that, in this instance, I did actually hear, although from what direction it proceeded I found impossible to say, a low and apparently distant, but harsh, protracted, and most unusual screaming or grating sound, the exact counterpart of what my fancy had already conjured up for the dragon's unnatural shriek, as described by the romancer. Oppressed as I certainly was upon the occurrences of this second and most extraordinary coincidence, by 1,000 conflicting sensations, in which wonder and extreme terror were predominant, I still retained sufficient presence of mind to avoid exciting, and by any observation, the sensitive nervousness of my companion. I was by no means certain that he had noticed the sound in question, although assuredly a strange alteration had, during the last few minutes, taken place in his demeanor. From a position fronting my own, he had gradually brought round his chair, so as to sit with his face to the door of the chamber, and thus I could but partially perceive his features, though I saw that his lips trembled as if he were murmuring inaudibly. His head had dropped below his breast. His head had dropped upon his breast. Yet I knew that he was not asleep, from the wide and rigid opening of the eye as I caught a glance of it in profile. The motion of his body, too, was at variance with this idea, for he rocked from side to side with a gentle yet constant and uniform sway. Having rapidly taken notice of this, I resumed the narrative of Sir Launcelot, which thus proceeded. And now the champion, having escaped from the terrible fury of the dragon, bethinking himself of the brazen shield, and of the breaking up of the enchantment which was upon it, removed the carcass from out of the way before him, and approached valorously over the silver pavement of the castle, to whence the shield was upon the wall, which in sooth tarried not for his full coming, but fell down at his feet upon the silver floor, with a mighty, great, and terrible ringing sound. No sooner had these syllables passed my lips than, as if a shield of brass had indeed at the moment fallen heavily upon a floor of silver, I became aware of a distinct, hollow, metallic, and clangorous, yet apparently muffled reverberation. Completely unnerved, I leapt to my feet, but the measured rocking movement of Usher was undisturbed. I rushed to the chair in which he sat. His eyes were bent fixedly before him, and throughout his whole countenance there reigned a stony rigidity. But as I placed my hand upon his shoulder, there came a strong shudder over his whole person. A sickly smile quivered about his lips, and I saw that he spoke in a low, hurried, and gibbering murmur, as if unconscious of my presence. Bending closely over him, I at length drank in the hideous import of his words. Not hear it? Yes, I hear it. I never heard it. Long, many minutes, many hours, many days have I heard it. Yet I dared not. Oh, pity me, miserable wretch that I am. I dared not to speak. We have put her living in the tomb. Said I not that my senses were acute? I now tell you that I heard her first feeble movements in the hollow coffin. I heard them many days ago, yet I dared not speak. And now, tonight, Ethelred, the breaking of the hermit's door, the death cry of the dragon, the clangor of the shield, say rather, the rending of her coffin, and the grating of the iron hinges of her prison, and her struggles within the coppered archway of the vault. Oh, whither shall I fly? Will she not be here anon? Is she not hurrying to upbraid me for my haste? Have I not heard her footstep upon the stair? Do I not distinguish that heavy and horrible beating of her heart? Madman! Here he sprang furiously to his feet, and shrieked out his syllables, as if the effort were giving him to as if in the effort he were giving up to his soul. Madman, I tell you that she now stands before the door! As if in the superhuman energy of the utterance there had been found the potency of a spell, the huge antique panels to which the speaker pointed threw slowly back, upon that instant, their ponderous and ebony jaws. It was the work of the rushing gust. But then, without those doors, there did stand the lofty and enshrouded figure of the Lady Madeline of Usher. There was blood upon her white robes, and the evidence of some bitter struggle upon every portion of her emaciated frame. For a moment, she remained trembling and reeling to and fro upon the threshold. Then, with a low moaning cry, fell heavily inward upon the person of her brother, and in her violent and now final death agonies, bore him to the floor a corpse, and a victim to the terrors he had anticipated. From that chamber and from that mansion I fled aghast. The storm was still abroad in all its wrath as I found myself crossing the old causeway. Suddenly, there shot along the path a wild light, and I turned to see whence a gleam so unusual could have been issued, for the vast house and its shadows were alone behind me. The radiance was that of the full setting and blood-red moon, which now shone vividly up through that once barely discernible fissure, of which I have before spoken as extending from the roof of the building in a zigzag direction to the base. While I gazed, this fissure rapidly widened. There came a fierce breath of the whirlwind. The entire orb of the satellite burst at once upon my sight. My brain reeled as I saw the mighty walls rushing asunder. There was a long, tumultuous shouting like the voice of 1,000 waters, and the deep and dank tarn at my feet closed sullenly and silently over the fragments of the House of Usher. Well, that wasn't creepy. And good timing on his part to flee. The House of Usher is no more. Yeah, that was some shit. Yes, as the kids would say, this is some next level shit. But man, yeah, that was the climax in particular was pretty wild. Yeah. That was pretty trippy. Although, back in those days, it wasn't exactly uncommon, that they would basically wait a few days before interning, the deceased, just again to make sure, to kind of avoid these exact kind of issues. But yeah, that was pretty wild. It kind of makes me think of, Eddie Murphy cracking those jokes about, about different types of people and stuff, right? Some people, they'll go into they'll stay like in a haunted house and just basically it's like, no, I paid for this. I'm going to see this through. I don't care what the hell is haunting it. Let me go get an exorcist. Other folks, they'll be like, hey honey, this place is fantastic. I really love it here. Get out. Too bad we can't stay. My ass, the very first second some shit like that would kind of hit, I'd be like, peace out, brother. This is, you know what? I will happily option it for the movies. Of course, I say that. And, I've had my share of unnerving instances and stuff. It's like, I think I talked about, before my trip that I took on the vacation to a vintage, authentic, actual log cabin, and the unnerving presence that I felt in there, that pretty much I was this close to just kind of bailing out after the first day, but I decided to stay that night, and it was a very sleepless night, but by the next day, it's like, it went from a very, to a somewhat hostile and unwelcoming energy of that presence to just basically kind of acceptance, like, okay, just, don't wreck the joint kind of thing. But then again, my dad tried to get into real estate at one point, and by real estate I mean, so he bought a house. It was a fixer-upper, but it was actually kind of turned out to be more than he bargained for. But how some places, they sometimes have that vibe that you go to, that you get, and there was just this unnerving sensation, and I wasn't the only one who felt it. My dad and also my brothers all had kind of felt this at one point or another, being in the house and stuff. Especially if you went up to the attic, or going up the back stairs and up to the attic or whatever, which I kind of eventually made my room after I finally kind of got used to it, and that presence, that sensation kind of abated. But I remember my dad at one point he essentially told me about how, because like he was there one day alone while I guess we were out, and I think we were visiting mom or whatever or something, because this was like the weekend that my brother and I were over with mom, but he was in the house alone for whatever reason, and just that presence was niggling at him and stuff, and just it was so unnerving that he basically just kind of got up and started shouting, "Show yourself, come on!" He basically challenged it. He went and challenged, like, he quote unquote challenged the spirit in the house, like, "Show yourself," just basically being all aggressive Filipino and shit. But I think after that though, it's either he got his nerve or made his peace with whatever the sensation was, because that was apparently the last time that he essentially had that issue. I never ended up doing that exact same technique, although one of my older brothers actually kind of did a similar thing to that, but me, it was just kind of more, I didn't exactly quite go that route, but it was kind of more of, I kind of took an approach like, look, knock off the suspense bullshit. If you're gonna do something, fucking do it already. I'm tired of this shit. It was kind of one of those. This was basically while I was still in high school and whatever else, and at some point I just kind of got tired of it, and it was like, look, either do something or get the fuck out. One or the other, stop this bullshit. And surprisingly enough, it opted to stop the bullshit, which is good, because I would not have preferred the other approach, right? But hey, you just how you kind of get that sensation, and it's usually when somebody's like passed away in the house or something, you just kind of feel that presence and stuff, and they have that kind of attachment, that kind of feeling. God, I had like another one when I was working in Grand Rapids for a while. My boss let me stay for a while, instead of like me renting like a motel or a hotel or whatever else and stuff like that. He basically let me stay at his lake house for like a reduced like rent thing, and it was still a bit of a drive. That it still put me at like about a 45-minute drive onto site to get to work and everything, but I enjoyed it for a little while. I mean, it was kind of nice being right off the lake and whatever else. I mean, I couldn't really break out the boats and do anything, but at least kind of got to hang out for a little bit. But it was a little unnerving, and there was just like, I had this, like the first couple of nights I was there, again, pretty familiar with the sensation at this point, right? So I'm talking to my boss like a couple of days after I'd first moved in and stuff, and he asked me, "So, how are you settling in? You do everything okay at the place?" My first question was, "Okay, so who died in the living room?" And he just kind of looked at me, kind of shocked, and he's like, "How did you know?" And I'm like, "Do you really want me to answer that?" And he's like, "No." And he described his father. So apparently, his father was the last person who stayed at the house, and he had gotten sick, and they wound up moving his hospital bed out from the bedrooms into the living room, which also happened to be like, where the sofa sleeper, the futon thing that I was sleeping at, was more or less in the same area, which is of course why I kind of was like, yeah. I mean, I know it was kind of charming. I would like to say that was essentially, I mean, I paraphrased it slightly, but I was a little more delicate about that. I was just kind of like, can I, I was like more like, can I ask, did somebody die in the living room? That kind of thing, but get out or I'll eat your ass. You know what? Let me allow that quick. I just looked over and saw that was actually being held in moderation, but hey, get out or I'll eat your ass. But yeah, it's just those kinds of sensations, you know? That's, I can totally see where the person was having those sensations, especially being in that and being in that kind of house, the House of Usher. That just, I don't know, man. Yes, it was, yeah, negative riz. Okay, the way I dropped it just now was yes, definitely negative riz. But like I said, I was a bit more delicate with my boss when we actually talked about it, you know. But anyway, so yeah, this story is really trippy, man. I can totally understand why dude dropped dead in sheer terror. So basically, like, they essentially took her last energy. She used the last of her energy to break out of her coffin and out of the entombed area to basically fall on her brother like that, who then died of fright. I am fairly confident my ass would have left. You'd have basically seen a ball of dust. You'd have seen, like, you know, like the dust kick up when I just, you know, the minute the doors push open and you see her standing there, I'd be like, gone, peace out, brother. I'd have been at the front door in, like, you know, 0.2 seconds flat. Usain Bolt who? No. Yeah, I know, all that work just to, like, you know, at the end of it, you finally spent all that work and then bang. Now, well, shit, you know, you were already comfortable where you were, man. Fuck it. You know what I mean? Although, you know, if I suddenly woke up and I was in a tomb, I would freak the hell out too and probably bust my way out. But then again, consider the fact that Madeline had enough presence of mind, even in her sickly state, when she basically became lucid, in, you know, to awaken in the coffin and have enough presence of mind not only to bust out of the screwed shut coffin, but then also to bust open those doors. I am pretty sure that those doors aren't necessarily designed. Oh, well, you know what? I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty sure nowadays they probably have a latch, a safety latch, so that you can open one from the inside, just again for safety purposes, because, you know, there's a lot of weird folks out there. But, you know, I can just imagine them like in the 1800s, you know, in the 1800s, there being like a really, really kind of like old style clasp on the outside. But imagine you'd have to, you know, have the presence of mind and the fortitude to not only bust out of your sealed coffin, but then also to bust out of the tomb and then make your way out there. I mean, but damn. Mm-hmm. The whole fact that that frail, emaciated, you know, frame was able to do that, that is some adrenaline and desperation. You know, I saw that, and I know that was supposed to be, I know that was meant to be womp womp, but I couldn't help but think of Shy Lily, and my first thing was womp womp, and I'm like, nope, that's way too upbeat for that. Way too upbeat for the topic. but yeah, man, this was actually wickedly cool. Or by wickedly cool, I mean freaky and creepy and depressing. The fall of the House of Usher, that was more like the descent of madness. I mean, damn. But that was a pretty good read, so I don't know, how'd you guys enjoy it? I mean, I know I can definitely still hear that there's still some strain in my voice. I gotta go ahead and keep working on those exercises. So, I'm always so nice with your story suggestions. It's because you basically mention the suggestions that you make are pretty interesting stuff. So yeah, I don't mind reading it at all. You know, creepy should be damned. Yeah, that was a hell of a thing. But I am glad you guys enjoyed it. So hopefully I was able to go ahead and do it justice in the reading. My tea has cooled a little bit. You know, it's a little early. We got ads starting up in about 13 minutes, but I'm gonna go refill and heat my tea for a second. So I'm just gonna go ahead and just take the headset off and put this on pause real quick. But okay. So, you know what else was just kind of uncanny during the reading? So, while some things were kind of coming right, like as the storm was breaking, as we were kind of getting to that climactic ending and stuff, like as he was actually describing the story and then those different sounds that were kind of hitting up, right as I started entering those parts, and I think it was like right about the second time that kind of came up, my downstairs neighbor started like dragging furniture around and was loud as hell downstairs. I was actually kind of concerned that you might have heard it for a second, but I'm sitting here reading this, talking about how no sooner had these syllables passed my lips than this sound came up, and then all of a sudden this sound from right below me starts like kind of dragging across. I'm like, what the hell? It's like, well, thanks for adding to the ambiance there, at least from my end. It's like, well, hell. Anyway, so that was the House of the Fall of Usher. A little bit more on the creepier side of some of the things that we've read on here, but then again, you know, as far as reading ASMR goes, worked pretty well. So, out of curiosity, are there any other things you guys want me to read right now that you want to listen to? The Eminence. That would be kind of cool if I could get away with reading it, you know? Actually, do I even have it? I'm pretty sure. I know I have the light novels. Hang on, let me check real quick. It's like, could I actually get away with reading that? It'd be kind of cool if I did. Let me check another. Oh wait, why the hell is it not here? Interesting. Yeah, I'd probably get in trouble. It'd probably be a pain if I, you know, kept the VOD or something like that. I mean, I don't necessarily have to post VOD, although I think I'm a couple behind. Like, I know I owe you 180 that reading from, I guess, a little while back. The one of the poem you had me read that you said that, you know, that your grandmother and your grandparents had you read or whatever. Yeah, The Owl and the Pussycat. I have that somewhere. I still gotta go ahead and edit that out and make that an actual separate video. I gotta work back on the editing. I have lapse on those. I haven't made time to do the proper. I haven't made proper time to do editing work for any of the videos. I've just been kind of dropping up the VODs and letting it go. But okay, I'm kind of surprised that I don't actually have it here. It must be on another drive. I've actually got 3 locations where I've got like all my books and stuff stored. It's like a couple hundred gigs. Oh yeah, here we go. The Eminence in Shadow. Yeah, I gotta work on that. Okay, you know what? I could probably do like maybe 1 chapter or something like that. Let me take a look at this. It's been a minute since I've read it. Is this something you guys want me to read? Bit of a change up. Hold up. You're down for whatever. I'm sure he was actually. It was kind of, sort of, mostly a joke, not really, ish, but pretty much. And then again, I was also probably sure he was talking about, he might have been thinking the series as opposed to the book. And then again, I don't know. But I do happen to have the light novel here. Okay, light novel 100%. So, The Eminence in Shadow by Daisuke Aizawa, which happens to currently be an anime right now, which is on High Dive. Then you can obviously watch in other areas. Let's see here. I got 2 minutes 45 seconds before the next set of ads breaks up, which I probably could have waited. Well, no, I couldn't wait to get and refill my tea, but I probably should have. Which is still too hot to drink. I just kind of rewarmed it a little bit, but. So anyway, I got a minute 45 before, but you know what? Why don't I do this? Because the break is going to go ahead and come up in it's going to hit in about a minute or so. So about a minute and a half-ish. Why don't we just go ahead and take another quick hour break, 3-minute break. Again, top of the hour here. Well, about 4, maybe 5 minutes and stuff. I am going to again try to see if I can get my voice any more toned up for this. I did actually use those voice 37 drops beforehand, but I'm gonna try taking it again real quick and see if I can get it as a quick shot. I mean, you're supposed to take it like 30 minutes before, or 3 hours, 2 to 3 hours before. But let's just kind of see how this goes. So I'm gonna go ahead and try doing that, and I need to also work on the overlays and get up a different, pausing for station messages kind of thing. But so yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and just throw this up, take a quick we'll take a quick break and we'll come back, and yeah, I'll try, let me see about maybe the first chapter. We'll see how that goes, which is technically the prologue. So we'll see how that goes. Right as I was coming back, that last sip of tea and soup just went right down the wrong fucking pipe. Whoops. But welcome back. Anyway. I just kind of noticed that the Attitude Mini just had stopped responding to the mic as well. But, no, I mean, PNG Tuber's still there. It's simply not responsive to the mic sound at all. But, anyway. Yeah, I know, right? Right at the last second, I tried to, rush that last sip down before I came right back from break, and next thing you know, I'm like, oh great. Anyhow. Okay, so you know what? Let's see here. So this is actually going to be The Eminence in Shadow, Volume 1. And I'm going to go ahead and read off the prologue here real quick. Prologue. Preparing the perfect stage. I honestly can't remember what catalyzed this desire. All I know is I've admired shadow brokers for as long as I can remember. Was it a certain anime? Or was it a manga? Or a movie? I guess it doesn't matter. I was all in for anything that featured a mastermind, or an eminence in shadow, as I like to call them. These characters were never the protagonists or final bosses, but were relegated to a role behind the scenes where they flaunted their powers and meddled in the affairs of others. I've always looked up to the men in the shadows. I wanted to be one of them. Think of children who worship their favorite superheroes. That was me, but with master puppeteers. Well, there was one thing that set us apart. My reverence for them wasn't short-lived. In fact, it buried itself deeper in my heart, never dying out and always guiding me through life. To become stronger, I learned everything from karate to boxing, from swordplay to mixed martial arts. I hammed it up during all my practices, concealing my true power from the world and preparing for the fated day. At school, I played the part of being pleasantly mediocre, an unassuming face in the crowd, like an NPC in a game or a part of the mob. I didn't do any harm. But behind this facade of normalcy, I was training full throttle. That's how I spent my entire youth. But as time passed, an uneasy feeling started to haunt me. I was due for a reality check. Yep, that's right. This was all for nothing. I realized I'd never become as powerful as shadow commanders in the stories. It didn't matter how hard I trained in martial arts. Sure, I could clobber a few punks, but that was it. It'd be a tough fight if anyone drew a gun, and if I was surrounded by soldiers in full gear, I'd be toast, dunzo, old news. years. The idea of a shadow broker getting curb stomped by some soldiers? Ridiculous. Let's say I trained for 10 more years, or that I became the greatest martial artist in the world. I'd still get wrecked by a gang of commandos. Or maybe I'd manage to escape by the skin of my teeth or train hard enough to fight back. It's all in the realm of possibility. But even if I somehow managed to do that, those guys could set off a nuke and vaporize me in an instant. There is a limit to the human body, that much I know. That said, my master puppeteers would never be taken down by a nuke, which means I needed to be impervious to them too. What does one need to survive a nuclear attack? Is it the ability to pack a punch? Could it be a body of steel? How about unlimited stamina? Wrong, and wrong again. You need a totally different kind of power. Some call it magic, others mana, or chi, or aura, or you get the point. Anything will do. I needed to obtain this clandestine ability. I'd managed to reach this conclusion when I finally confronted reality head-on. I'll try to explain. Let's say someone is on a quest for magical powers. Anyone would think they're nuts. Hell, I know I would. I'd think they'd gone bonkers. But consider this. No one in the world has proved magic exists, or disproved it. I couldn't find these powers with my sanity intact. I had to dive to the depths of lunacy. I started training in a new way that was damn near impossible. After all, no one knows how to acquire magic, mana, chi, auras, or what have you. I practiced Zen meditation. I braved the purification ceremony of standing under waterfalls. I focused my entire being inward. I fasted. I mastered the art of yoga. I converted religions. I searched for holy spirits. I prayed to God. I strapped myself to a cross. There was no right answer, which meant I groped my way through the darkness and sprinted down my chosen path. Which brings us here. I'm about ready to start my final summer as a high schooler, and I've yet to discover magic or mana or chi or auras. It is already dark by the time I finish my daily training session. I pick up and put on my underwear, which I chuck to the side, and wiggle my arms through the sleeves of my school uniform. I have yet to pick up these secret magical skills, but I've been starting to feel the effects of my training, I think, of late. Like, right now. I can see flashing lights going off in my mind and sense the world is spinning. It could be magic, or auras. In either case, I'm feeling its effects, that's for sure. I'm proud to announce that I've completed another successful session. When I'm in the thick of it, I rip off every single article of clothing and get buck naked in the forest. It makes me one with the universe. I bash my skull into the trunk of a giant tree to physically force out my worldly thoughts. Plus, it stimulates my brain and urges my latent powers to awaken. You know, I'm all about logic when it comes to these things. Yeah, everything's starting to get all blurry right about now. It's a sensation comparable to giving myself a concussion. I make my way out of the forest with the lightest of footsteps, feeling like I'm treading on clouds. Just then, I see light. 2 beams floating in the air and slicing through space. How strange. They're beckoning me, guiding me somewhere. Magic, I whisper, tiptoeing toward the illumination. It must be. It's gotta be. I finally found the powers of the unknown. I notice that I've gone from walking to sprinting, tripping over the roots of trees and continuing to stagger forward, on and on like a beast in the forest. Magic, 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 I chant, bounding toward the lights and ready to snatch them out of midair. As a pair of headlights flood my vision with a blinding whiteness, I hear the shrill whine of a sudden brake ringing and ringing, and then a collision. Its impact pierces through my body and my magic. In conclusion, I was able to find magical powers. When I open my eyes, I sense that I'm surrounded by this energy. Though I gotta admit, it looks different from the two lights. No biggie. Oh, and one other small detail. As a side effect, I managed to reincarnate. I bet I opened the door to another world when I found magic or something. Whatever. As for right now, I'm a baby boy, a few months old. I only recently started forming thoughts, but it's still hard for me to guess how much time has elapsed at any given moment. Plus, I don't know any words, but I guess it's plenty to recognize that this civilization is more or less the same as Europe in the Middle Ages. But none of that's important. I've acquired magical powers. That's the end-all be-all. I couldn't care less about how it happened or any bonus features. I notice magic as soon as I start displaying glimmers of consciousness. All around me, I can see minuscule grains of light floating and shimmering. It reminds me of those times in my past life when I frolicked through a field of flowers stark naked. To train and find spirits, obviously. As it turns out, my training wasn't a total waste after all. I mean, my ability to detect this energy is proof enough, and I can control it as easily as my limbs. It's comparable to when I strapped my naked body to a cross, a nod to Jesus. Or maybe when I flip-flopped religions and danced around in prayer in my birthday suit. I bet every little thing in my training sessions helped me in the long run. It's already taught me that I can get stronger. Plus, time is of no consequence for a baby. I'm ready to use these years to train and become an eminence in shadow once and for all. Oops, I think I made a duty. Which reminds me, I heard somewhere that birds let their droppings dribble out involuntarily, and I think human babies are the same. I can fight the good fight with logic and reasoning, but it feels as though my instincts take over, whispering, "Just do it," in my ear. That said, this is me we're talking about. I spent my waking hours training in my past life. Pulling together all the strength in my body, I tightened my sphincter, buying me some time. Wah! To summon people. I think it's been 10 years. You know, magic is something else. It means I can surpass the bodily limitations of humans, lift ginormous boulders with a single finger, dash twice as fast as a horse, leap higher than a house. That said, I'm no match for nukes. Well, I know my defenses will increase with my magical capacity, but have you seen the firepower of those weapons on Earth? There was a time when I contemplated forgetting about them entirely, because we don't have nukes in this world. But what good is a master puppeteer who settles for less? No good. Not at all. That means my next mission is to become strong enough to beat weapons of mass destruction. After extensive research and training, I found one potential solution, which I've been incorporating into my daily experiments. Oh yeah, and it seems I've been born into a noble family. For generations, members of this family have trained to become Dark Knights, who use magic to power up and slay enemies in battle. And as my family's rising star of a son, I'm living my days as your average apprentice. After all, Shadowbreakers need to be extremely selective about when, where, and to whom they reveal their powers. Yeah, I'll lie and wait until then. I know I'm not exerting my true potential, and that I'm cutting corners, but I learned some skills as an apprentice that have come in handy. Like how magic is used on the battlefield in this world. It's been a good opportunity for me to reflect on my own techniques. To be completely honest, It's clear to me that the fighting styles from my past life were 100 times more logical and refined than the ones here. I mean, look at any contemporary martial arts battle. These fighters rebuke unnecessary movements, drawing from various combat schools and whittling them down to the creme de la creme. This creates the conditions for the perfect fight. It relies on the rules of the game, of course, but this mental attitude can be used to identify the best of the best in any situation. And then consider this world. First and foremost, their fighting techniques stay in their country of origin, which means different schools of combat don't cross borders. Plus, there are certain secret skills that countries won't allow out of their jurisdiction. Oh hey, thanks for the follow, life. Ill-fated docket. Thanks so much for the follow. Welcome, welcome. Plus, there are certain secret skills in countries that the countries won't allow out of their jurisdiction. Yeah, I know, it is a cool name, isn't it? It took me a second, but... Not that we'd be able to spread them to begin with, since no forms of media are readily available to us. This means we can't combine techniques from other forms of fighting, much less reject or improve our own. If I had to describe this system in one word, I'd call it unrefined. But there's one fundamental difference between the two worlds. That's right, magic. It completely changes the baseline of physical performance. Take physical strength, for example. I can lift someone up with one hand, which means any knowledge about hand-to-hand combat in wrestling or ground fighting goes out the window. Even if we're in a mounted grappling position, I can soar through the air by flexing my abs. If I've got my foot hooked on an opponent in an offensive guard, I can blast them off me by activating my leg muscles. Yeah, ground fighting is out of the question. It's like how humans have their method of combat and gorillas have a breed of their own, and I'll just leave it at that. There are also differences in the distance and speed at which combatants step into their attacks, meaning it's harder to predict their movements in battle. This might be the most important thing. I mean, martial arts are all about reading your opponent at an appropriate range. The angle, position, and distance of your attacks are everything. It took me a while to get the hang of that last one, especially because these fighters attack from afar, like 16 feet apart. I mean, I guess I get it. They're lightning fast and take ginormous steps, and I just assumed this was their way of fighting, until I realized it was to compensate for their poor defense tactics. I'm sure this is relatable to all martial artists. Those who can't guard will stand too far from their opponents. It's really scary to get hit. I get it. It's tempting to retreat to where your opponent can't reach you. But this results in a contest where one fighter attacks and the other retreats, and vice versa, which is a real snore. You call this outboxing? Try again. This is just an exercise of running back and forth. It doesn't matter if the fighters are 5 or 100 meters apart. They can't land a decent hit either way. It could be 6 or 7 or 10 meters, it's all the same. This has been a public service announcement to close the gap and duke it out. But once you cross a certain threshold, 1 millimeter can make a huge difference. And it stands at the exact point where I can both land a blow and react to an attack. Throw in other factors like the angle of my hits, and the slightest turn can mean an advantage, or a disadvantage. The narrowest of margins is the best range between two fighters. A battle shouldn't be one combatant dashing in 16 feet and the other leaping back 19. I guess I came into this whole thing with an idea of what to expect from other worlds, which, compounded with my unfamiliarity with magic, left me confused about their combat scene. But, I've gotten my bearings straight as of late. It's all chill now. I train every day at home, where our dad basically directs us on how to throw down, and I grapple with my older sister. I know she's only 2 years older than me, but she has natural talent, according to everyone else. If she keeps it up, she's the one who'll take over as head of the family, which isn't uncommon in this world, since magic can make women powerful enough to become the heir. Jeez, you're so strong. I whimper every day as she kicks my ass. Hang on a sec. Yes, I guess this is why people have mods, right? Hang on a sec. Let me see if I can do this from here. Oh, right. It won't let me do it from here now. Yeah, I had to actually do it from the moderation panel, or I had to type it. I could have just typed the command in over at the stream manager view. I didn't realize that till late. Twitch changed the API to where you can no longer, your third-party apps like Chatterino can no longer issue like slash commands like ban and stuff like that anymore. So I can't do the commands from within Chatterino anymore. In fact, it kind of like nerfed a lot of Chatterino. So like I can't get the user list and stuff anymore in Chatterino because, like I said, once and that was back in April when they started, when they made that change and enforced that rule. So also, what up, Bez? Good to see you. Good to see you. Also, quick reminder, I believe third place is still open. So we are in the middle of... Yeah, I know, it's been a minute, right? Been a while since you actually happened to be up here, right? So, but good to see you, good to see you. We are actually in the middle of just kind of reading, doing a reading stream. I am actually reading The Eminence in Shadow Volume 1. I'm currently in the middle of the prologue. So... And yeah, you know what? It does make sense for for us to be each other's kind of mods and stuff, right? Although if I recall correctly, didn't Zeb pretty much just say what you call it? You can either be a VIP or you can be a mod, but you can't actually have both. Yeah. Yeah, the light novel actually opens differently than the anime does. So I think that the anime opens up with one of the short stories from the end of the volume or something like that, if I recall correctly. But I do like the way the anime kind of opened. I think they did a pretty good job. This is the end. Yeah, it's probably the end of volume 3. So anyway, let us continue. Jeez, you're so strong. I whimper every day she kicks my ass. But I can't wait. If I want to become a Shadow Commander, I've got to establish myself as the most average of all background characters. That's how I've been living out my day-to-day. Tack on lessons about how to act as an aristocrat, and hanging out with people to secure my place as a low-profile extra, and I've barely got any free time during the day. Which means the only time for me to train is after everyone else has gone to bed, late into the night. I may be cutting into my beauty sleep, but I've been using magic to recover super quick and meditation to catch some Z's in new ways. And now, I've pretty much got short sleeper syndrome. I make it work. Okay, time to get down to business. I blast through my usual training regimen in the forest. I've got something special planned today. I heard that rogues have taken up residence in the ghost town nearby. According to my investigation, it's a large gang of thieves, and the perfect opportunity to test my new weapon. I take down bandits here and there, but a whole group of criminals? That's the event of the year. And I'm always short on sparring partners, so I welcome evildoers with open arms. Oh, please, please, please infest this place with more crime. I think it's standard for villages to try to deal with offenders on their own terms, but they mostly get away scot-free. I mean, our judicial system is in the city, which is why I've decided to take the law into my own hands. Today marks the historic day of my first official battle with my newest weapon. I've been experimenting with it for months, and I call it the Slime Bodysuit. Allow me to explain. We can use magic in this world to strengthen our bodies and weapons, but there are energy losses when it's transferred from one form to another. For example, if I run 100 currents of magic through an average steel sword, only 10% of them will be of use in combat. A whopping 90% is lost. Even a mithril sword, which is known to be compatible with magic, it's considered high-end if it performs at 50% capacity. That's when slimes caught my eye. A slime is a magical being that uses energy to change form and wobble from place to place. According to my research, I found they have a conductivity of an astonishing 99%. On top of that, they're in a liquid state, which means they can change their shape at will. I started testing slime jellies after capturing and crushing their cores, easily more than 1,000 of them. In fact, I pushed them to the brink of extinction in my area by killing too many, and had to go on an expedition to find more. The jellies are easy to handle and strong to boot. I successfully molded the slime into a wearable bodysuit, which is super lightweight and silent, unlike armor. Plus, it almost supports my movements. And I've given it killer defenses, of course. As for right now, I'm wrapped in a black slime bodysuit. It's a simple, no frills getup that fits my body perfectly, except for eyes, nostrils, and mouth. I'm virtually indistinguishable from the criminal in a certain famous detective manga. I might want to think up a more suitable design when I'm intervening in a scheme as a full-fledged shadow broker. I managed to arrive at the ghost town late into the night, but I can see a few lights out in the darkness. The thieves seem to be having a feast to celebrate the robbing of merchants. Wow, I'm super lucky. You see, thieves aren't good at planning, and they immediately squander what they steal, which means they only have something decent right after a successful attack. And one man's treasure is another man's treasure. What's theirs is mine. This is how I'll get the funds to become a puppet master. Anyway, I crashed their feast, excited as all hell. Not with a surprise attack, because that won't make for a good practice session. Yahoo! Hand over the loot, scumbags! I shriek in the middle of their banquet. Who the hell's this puny dude? I mean, I'm only 10 years old. Duh. It's only natural that I'm short. You heard me. Now fork over the goods, I shout. punting the rude man across the room for calling me small. The other thieves finally draw their weapons. "Hey, keep it up and we ain't gonna hold back, you brat. Take that," I exclaim as I slice through his neck, severing his head from his shoulders mid-sentence. That's right. My sword is made of slime, which means I can draw it from my bodysuit when the situation calls for it. And it has a bunch of nifty functions. Number 1, it can elongate. And that, and that, and that. I extend my sword and slay all the dinky thieves in the vicinity. I stretch the slime out in the shape of a whip with edges as sharp as a sword. It's my first time wielding it, so I'm a tad nervous. But I can totally see how it might come in handy. And that, and that, and... Huh? I notice the room has gone all silent as I get a little too carried away with slashing and slicing around me. Wait, is there only one guy left? Who are you? I guess you'll be my guinea pig for function number 2. The hell do you mean? To break it down, you look stronger than the rest of them. I'm assuming you're like their boss or something, right? Your chances of winning are squat, but if you let me practice on you, I bet you'll live for like 2 extra minutes. Good luck. Stop playing, you brat. In the capital, I'm the... Hey, you. Skip the speech and come at me. Die, damn it! Booms the boss, or whatever, as he closes the distance between us, taking his sweet old time to swing at me, and I obviously don't budge. His sword plunges straight into my chest, and I'm thrown to the ground on impact. That's what you get for messing with me. I've mastered the Royal Bushin method and... What? Ta-da! You couldn't even scratch me. I rise to my feet as if nothing had happened, and wow, I couldn't be happier with my suit's defenses. I mean, these weak as shit attacks can't even touch me. I've heard it seems to be all the rage in the capital. Show me. Damn you! Swears the boss as he strikes me. Yeah, no sweat. As he swings his sword with all his might, I don't even ready mine. Sidestepping and ducking to dodge him, no problem. The Royal Bushin method, was it? I could get into their ways of wielding the sword. I mean, it's not every day you get to see someone fighting over something other than spirituality, old-fashioned standards, or personal beliefs in this world. This was a fight motivated by logic. I can see it in his clumsy set of attacks. In the length of a second, a small step forward. I see him calculate his next strike and take creative approaches. That said, his attacks leave a lot to be desired, and in the next free moment, I step just out of his range. Why? Why can't I hit you? I mean, you're weaker than my old man. Though I guess you're stronger than my sister. Not that it means anything. And I bet she'll whoop your butt in another year. You little shit! He screeches, frantically bashing his sword in my direction. I parry his advances before kicking him lightly in the shin, snapping my leg forward quickly as though on reflex. Gwaha! Why? The boss whimpers, curling into a fetal position and clutching his leg. Blood drips from his shin and pools on the ground. It's a cheap trick, you know. I have a blade as sharp as an ice pick sticking out from my toes. The second handy-dandy feature of the slime sword is that I can wield my blade from wherever and whenever I want. I thought this tactic showed the most potential. All I have to do is get in front of the enemy and slash him with the sword in my shoe, since lower body attacks are hard to block. I parry hits, lock blades, and give my opponent a kick. It's nothing flashy, but it gets the job done. I guess we're through. Wait! You didn't even last 2 minutes, I note, before kicking the boss in the chin with the blade on my foot. Death by impalement. He twitches as I roll him to the side and rummage through his loot. Artwork? I can't sell that. Hard pass on food. Come on. Where are the cash, jewels, and precious metals? Gimme, gimme, gimme! There are several carriages worth of spoils, and many dead merchants. I whisper to the corpses. I've avenged you. Now you can rest, knowing your treasures will be put to good use. I hope you make it to heaven. I gather my haul and pray in silence. I'm guessing I found about 5 million zenny. 1 zenny is more or less equal to 1 Japanese yen. All this will help fund my activities as a shadow broker. You know, the world would be a much better place if it were overrun by criminals. Oh, how I wish life were like a video game and I could encounter enemies by walking down the street. Please wreak more havoc in your next life, I say to the boss, giving him a thumbs up, when I notice something past my fingertip. Is that a cage? It looks sturdy and pretty big. Do they have slaves? Hard pass on anything I can't trade for cash. But what if there's something valuable inside? I lift its cover. Well, this is unexpected. I'm not sure how to describe it, but this cage holds a mound of rotting flesh. I can kinda tell it's human, maybe, but no clue as to its age or gender. But it's alive. Wait, it might even be conscious. I peer into the cage and the flesh jolts all of a sudden. I've heard of the church executing these creatures. I think they're called the possessed. They're born as normal humans until their flesh rots out of nowhere, fated for death. But the church goes out of its way to purchase them, executing them in the name of purification. They claim they're exorcising demons, but they're really just murdering the sick. But the ignorant masses applaud and praise them for keeping peace on Earth. It's just as you'd expect from the Middle Ages. What a friggin' downer. I bet I'd get more zenny than this entire load of spoils if I were to sell this to the church, but that's pointless to say since I can't sell it. Well, I guess I should put it out of its misery. I stick my slime sword into the cage when I notice something else. Namely, this mound of flesh contains an abundance of magic. I've been training my magic since childhood, but this surpasses mine. It's honestly beastly. And this... is this wavelength the effects of a magical overload? I guess a magical overload must be the reason this turned into a pile of flesh. I've suffered its effects firsthand before. If I hadn't gotten it under control back then, I might have ended up suffering the same fate. I know magic has certain effects on the body, which I felt all too well that fated day. I could sense its potential to raise my tolerance for magic and allow me to handle more of it, but it would be too dangerous to induce a magical overload. I'd toss the idea. But if I were to hypothetically conduct experiments on a product of this phenomenon, I can get closer to being a shadow commander without any risks. I can use this, I say as I reach out to the flesh and infuse it with magic. Wow, it's been a whole month, huh? I think as I recall my first encounter with the mound in Hivasai, back in the same abandoned village. I wonder why things turned out this way. All my experiments on the flesh were going swimmingly, well until recently. I spent my days pumping the flesh with magical energy. I mean, it wasn't my body, so I could go buck wild on it. I was plugging away at my little experiment, testing this and that. In all honesty, it was fun. After all, one of my greatest joys in life is sensing that I'm getting closer to the essence of magic and watching my power grow before my eyes. I pushed forward, inching toward the boundaries of magic with more precision, power, and detail, until I finally had the magical overload under the tip of my thumb when a blonde elven girl appeared. I guess it would be more accurate to say I was too fixated on improving my command of magic to notice the flesh was a blonde elf until that moment. Huh. To think that stinking pile of flesh would return to its original form. I tried sending her off with a lighthearted farewell. You know, the typical, you're a free elf and happy trails and you've got a bright future ahead of you. But she said she didn't have a home, insisting on repaying me for saving her life, which I didn't actually do. It was all just a coincidence. I considered ditching her before things got annoying, but I ended up making her Shadow Broker Subordinate A. I mean, she doesn't strike me as the type to betray me, and she seems smart. There's something about her that makes me suspect she has too much talent. And even though she's also 10 years old, she's more than enough proof that elves develop faster mentally than humans. And from this day forward, you will be Alpha. A or Alpha, either works. Understood, she replies with a nod. She's your stereotypical elf, a beauty with blonde hair, blue eyes, and fair skin. And your job is... I stopped to think for a moment. This is a big one. Her job is to be the assistant to a shadow commander. No mistakes there. Which means I gotta set the scene by answering some basic questions. Like, what exactly is an eminence in shadow? And what purpose do they serve? Fleshing out the appropriate narrative is key. I mean, if I said I was fighting to get revenge for losing at pachinko slots, I wouldn't seem too cool, right? I have to choose wisely. I mean, all my daydreams are filled with puppeteers from even before I came into this world, and certainly after. I've mixed and matched thousands, no, tens of thousands of possible scenarios in my mind, and I have the perfect one for the occasion. To hide in the shadows and prevent the resurrection of Diablos the Demon. Diablos the Demon? Alpha cocks her head in confusion. I'm sure you've heard of him. You know, the stories of long, long ago. Diablos brought our world to the brink of destruction when 3 brave warriors, a human, an elf, and a therianthrope, or a hybrid beast, teamed up to destroy him and protected the world. Oh yeah, but isn't that a fairy tale? Nope, it really happened. But the truth is way more complicated than that. I continue as a small wry smile appears on my face. I mean, getting to my level and twisting out a scenario from a legend is a piece of cake. Just before the heroes slayed the demon, with his very last breath, he put a curse on them, which is known as the Curse of Diablos. The Curse of Diablos? I've never heard of that before. Oh, but it exists. It's the curse of the possessed, and the very disease that ravished your body. What? No way. Alpha goes bug-eyed in horror. The descendants of the heroes have suffered from this illness. Back in the day, the Curse of Diablos used to be curable, just like yours. No one would believe that Alpha was possessed until recently. Her smooth and unblemished skin is evidence to back up my story. I mean, even though it's a big fat lie. It's proof that one is a descendant of the heroes who saved the world. You know, the possessed used to be lauded, appreciated, and protected in the past. But no one appreciates us anymore, let alone... Alpha trails off, screwing up her face. There's someone out there who twisted history, erasing the truth about the lineage of the possessed and hiding the cure to the curse. What's worse, these people became targets of shame. Who would do such a thing? Those who scheme to resurrect Diablos. That's because those with the curse carry the bloodlines of the heroes and high levels of magical energy. In other words, they serve as a major military force for us. On the flip side, they're a nuisance to his supporters. Which is why we're called the possessed and disposed of. Exactly. You lost your hometown and family, all because you've been accused of committing a false sin. Aren't they despicable? Yeah, there's no way I wouldn't find them absolutely detestable. The cult of Diablos. That's our enemy. They only work behind the scenes, which is why we must conceal ourselves too. Lurk in the darkness and hunt down shadows. I'm guessing they've got to be formidable if they have enough say to pull the strings behind the scenes, which means that our enemies hold positions of power, and that hordes of people under their control don't know the truth. I nod seriously. Our journey may be perilous, but we must go forward. Are you with me? If that's what you want, then I'll devote my life to it. We'll punish these sinners with death. Alpha stares at me with her intense blue eyes and smiles defiantly. Her face is lovely, even in its youth, and teems with determination and resolve. I fist pump in my mind. Woohoo! This elf girl is super gullible. Obviously, the cult of Diablos doesn't exist, which means we'll never find them. It also provides grounds for me to accuse and slaughter any thief syndicate in the area for being in the cult. And I bet we can stake out battles between fighters and intervene as shadow commanders. And we can say fake deep stuff for our parting words, like the end is near, or the resurrection of the demon is nigh. And it would be so cool if we could arrive with the wind on a battlefield saying, "You fools, you're being controlled," before completely wiping everyone out. Wow, I could honestly go on and on. Right, I almost forgot. The most important part. This name of this organization. We are the Shadow Garden. We lurk in the darkness and hunt down shadows. The Shadow Garden. That's a nice name. I know, right? It's sick. This is the very moment the Shadow Garden and the world's greatest enemy, the Cult of Diablos, is born. I move one step closer to becoming a mastermind. I guess we can start by wielding our magic and practicing sparring with each other. I'll act as the main fighter in battle, but you've got to get stronger to wrangle in the small fry. I know. We've got a tough enemy on our hands. I have to raise the bar for myself. Right, that's the spirit. And we have to find other descendants of heroes and protect them. Yeah, all in moderation. It would be fun to play Shadow Broker with more people, since that'd make it feel more like a legit organization. But I didn't need that many people. I honestly wouldn't have a problem if it just stayed the two of us. Well, for now, let's just focus on getting stronger, I suggest, readying my wooden sword. I block Alpha's attack, which has an unexpected bite to it. To think she was only a novice until recently. Alpha has a good feel for things and plenty of magical energy, which means I can make good use of her. Under the moonlight, I swing my wooden sword as these thoughts run through my mind. That was the prologue to The Eminence in Shadow, which is an anime out, and this was actually the light novel, Volume 1. So if you guys enjoyed this, I highly recommend that you go pick up the light novel, have it a read and everything else, and also go check out the anime. It was a pretty decent adaptation. Felt a little short, but hey, time flies. And also, thanks for the follow, Fixed Qual. So, good to see you. Thanks for dropping in. Appreciate you. So, anybody else in the background lurking and hanging out and stuff, we're just doing a little bit of reading ASMR, just kind of reading some various light novels and stuff. And really I'm testing to see how well my voice is holding up. Having just come back from laryngitis not too long ago, I'm still having some issues, so I'm trying to get back in the swing of things. But what'd you guys think? How did you enjoy? I saw some of Lumi's commentary, like, yes, this is the most anime thing she's ever animated. Which, yep, that's about right, but although he does get kind of wordy, especially in some parts of that prologue, I'm like, come on, man, alright, you are kind of going a little too off the deep end with some of this stuff, but hey. You're rating anime out of 10. Nope. Seems legit. So, we have just broken the 3-hour mark. Think you would enjoy watching it more than reading it? Probably. It was well written. Yeah, I mean, it was written well enough. You know, considering it's a light novel and the audience, yeah, I'd say it was a pretty decent job. But yeah, I highly recommend. It's over on High Dive at highdive.com if you want to go check out the anime, or like I said, there are other channels you can find it. But anyway, all things being said, let's see. The next ad break, our hour break is going to start in about 4 minutes. So, but yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it. You know, I think with Bez, the first time when I decided to try reading, you know, I did a test run with Bez, you know, just to kind of see how it would kind of flow and everything. And in that stream, I actually read chapter 1 of Kuma 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 Bear, volume 1. So I thought that was actually pretty interesting as well. You know, it seemed to kind of go over well. At least Bez seemed to enjoy it. But hey. But yeah, it's a fun thing. It's definitely not terribly serious. It's one of those. Well, I'm not gonna go into both of that. Yeah, I just suggest you just go check out the anime if you wanna go hit it up. But it's a good premise. Definitely worth checking out. Yes, Kuma 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 Bear is also an anime, which also I noticed has a second season. I've been watching recently as well. So definitely worth hitting up and taking a look. Anyway, like I said, it's been about 3 hours. I'm gonna go ahead and call it here because I don't want to like over stress the voice and stuff again. And I can already kind of feel it, you know, being a little bit on the hoarse side. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and end it here. I appreciate you guys coming and hanging out, and yeah, the gang is pretty much all here. Almost. You know, we're still missing a couple of people, but it's nice to see you guys, and glad you guys came and hung out and stuff. And you know, always a fun time. Glad you guys were around and everything. So I hope you enjoyed everything. And well, I don't know. I can probably do one more. Let's see here. How was that? Oh, good. I'm glad you enjoyed. Anyway. Alright, guys. Well, thanks so much for hanging out and stuff, and I will see you again on Saturday. So, glad I got my OBS issues all fixed and stuff, and yeah, it was a fun time. So, I will see you guys later. Have a good night.